Imagine waking up one morning to find everything you've worked for under attack, not by thieves, not by a natural disaster, but by your own homeowners association. That's exactly what happened to me when my HOA decided my century-old barn violated community aesthetics. Within weeks, they sent demolition crews, tearing down a piece of my family's history without warning. But what they didn't know, is that I had a way to strike back. And trust me, they never saw it coming. After the barn was destroyed, I was furious, but the HOA acted like they'd done me a favor. At the next board meeting, they smugly explained that my outdated structure was lowering property values and ruining the community's image. They even fined me $15,000 for non-compliance, claiming I should have demolished it myself. But here's the thing, that barn had been on my land for over 110 years. It was older than the HOA itself. It belonged to my grandfather, who built it with his own hands, and now it was gone. Erased, like it never existed. That night, I sat on my porch, staring at the empty lot where the barn used to stand. Anger burned, but beneath it was something else, determination. If they thought they could steamroll me, they were wrong. I started digging through county records, old surveys, and HOA bylaws, looking for anything I could use against them. That's when I found something unexpected. Turns out, the HOA's crown jewel, a $5 million luxury resort lake, sat on a drainage system that ran straight through a piece of land I still legally owned. And buried in the fine print of an old deed from the 1960s was a detail they'd clearly overlooked, a small, rusted maintenance valve connected to that very system. I visited the site the next day, pretending to take a casual walk. And there it was, hidden behind some bushes, locked but very real. One twist of that valve could lower the lake's water level by several feet in just hours. Suddenly, I held the HOA's most valuable asset in my hands. But I didn't rush. No, I waited. I planned. And when they pushed me one step too far, that's when everything changed. It all came to a head one sweltering afternoon when the HOA sent me yet another letter, this time demanding I pay an additional $7,500 in landscaping penalties for failing to maintain visual harmony after they demolished my barn. That was it. That was the moment I knew they weren't going to stop until they bled me dry. I grabbed that letter, crumpled it in my fist, and drove straight to the resort. I parked near the edge of the lake, heart pounding as I walked the narrow trail through the trees. The valve was exactly where I'd found it weeks before, tucked away behind a curtain of tangled vines. My hands trembled as I brushed the leaves aside, exposing the rusted handle beneath. It wasn't just a piece of metal anymore, it was power. I hesitated, thinking about the families laughing on their boats, the kids splashing in the shallows, and the HOA board members who had humiliated me in front of my neighbors. My stomach knotted, but then I thought of my grandfather, of the barn, of everything they'd taken without remorse. That hesitation disappeared. I took a deep breath, gripped the valve, and twisted hard. At first, nothing happened. Then there was a deep, groaning sound, like something ancient waking up. Within minutes, I heard the rush of water surging beneath the ground. The surface of the lake rippled violently, tiny whirlpools forming near the far docks. I walked away calmly, heart still racing, leaving the valve wide open. By sunset, the shoreline had already receded by nearly 3 feet, exposing muddy banks where boats once floated. The next morning, chaos erupted. The HOA was in full panic mode. Resort guests were furious, homeowners were calling non-stop, and the board had no idea what was happening. They thought it was a natural leak. I didn't correct them. Not yet. By the third day, the resort looked like a disaster zone. The lake had dropped nearly 6 feet, leaving boats stranded on dry, cracked mud. Homeowners who'd paid premium prices for lakefront views were furious, screaming at board members during emergency meetings. The HOA hired engineers, divers, and even environmental specialists, desperate to figure out where millions of gallons of water had gone. I watched from my porch as chaos brewed just down the road. Helicopters circled overhead, news vans lined the entrance to the resort, and HOA officials scrambled for answers. But no one suspected me, not yet. They issued public statements blaming natural subsurface leaks and unexpected geological shifts, trying to calm angry residents. But behind closed doors, I knew panic was spreading like wildfire. One evening, I walked the shoreline under the fading light, pretending to be a concerned homeowner. HOA President Linda Carrington, the same woman who signed the order to demolish my barn, stormed past me, shouting into her phone. "If we don't stabilize this lake soon, we're looking at lawsuits, millions in damages." Her voice cracked with stress. I smiled politely and kept walking. By the end of the week, the resort's crown jewel had shrunk into a muddy, mosquito-infested swamp. Dead fish floated along the edges. Expensive docks splintered under their own weight. The HOA had poured over $500,000 into emergency repairs and still had no solution. And yet, I didn't touch the valve again. One twist had been enough to turn their paradise into a nightmare. Every day, as they scrambled to control the damage, I sipped my coffee on the porch, watching them burn through money and credibility. But I knew my secret wouldn't stay hidden forever. Eventually, someone would trace the drainage system back to that old maintenance valve. When they did, they'd realize exactly who owned the land it sat on, and who had the power to destroy them completely. The real question was, how long could I keep them guessing? 2 weeks later, the HOA finally discovered the truth. During an emergency inspection, their engineers traced the lake's drainage path straight to my property line, and right to that rusted maintenance valve. By the next morning, I had 3 board members, 2 attorneys, and the HOA president herself standing in my driveway. Linda's face was pale, her perfect composure gone. "You knew about this?" she demanded, waving a thick stack of papers. I leaned against my truck, calm as ever. "Of course I knew. It's my land. My grandfather built that valve before your HOA even existed." Her jaw clenched. They couldn't touch me. The deed was airtight. That patch of land, and everything attached to it, was mine. I told them I'd be happy to help restore their lake. But only if they erased every single fine, reimbursed me for the destroyed barn, and issued a written apology to every homeowner for overstepping their authority. At first, they threatened lawsuits. Then they consulted their lawyers. Within days, they realized they had no case. The HOA quietly agreed to my terms, desperate to stop the bleeding before residents revolted completely. I got a check big enough to rebuild the barn better than before, along with a signed letter clearing me of any violations. As for the lake, let's just say I kept the valve locked, but in my name this time. The HOA learned a brutal lesson: push the wrong person too far, and you might just lose everything you're trying to control. Neighbors still whisper about the great draining, and the HOA board has never fully recovered. Membership dropped, lawsuits piled up, and Linda eventually resigned. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't shouting or fighting, it's showing them how powerless they really are. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare like this, you're not alone. Drop your story in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned, because here at HOA Case Files, we've got plenty more shocking cases to uncover.